Hello world, and welcome back to, or welcome to, the Pop Culture Patter podcast. As always, I'm your host, Callum Brown, and this week's guests are co-owners of the podcast studio Glasgow, Mark and Cam Hunter. Mark and Cam have both been instrumental and played massive roles in supporting my development, both as a podcaster and as a person, since recording here, and I wanted to give you all a chance to get to know them too. Mark and Cam discuss the origins of the studio and provide more information on the services offered. As always, this podcast is recorded at the Podcast Studio Glasgow, the East End of Glasgow's digital creative hub, and the only podcast studio in the UK and possibly the world that offers 18 years of experience in the medium and is ran by a pioneer in British podcasting. To find out more information relating to the wide range of services offered or to book a session, please visit www.podcaststudioglasgow.com. And before we get into this episode, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Brown & Co Properties, an award-winning family-run estate agency based in Whitburn, West Lothian. With a property mark protected service for a fixed fee, we are your go-to agent for expert property sales advice in the area. Get on the go with Brown & Co.
Mark, welcome back, and Cam, welcome to the podcast.
All right. First time being on the podcast in here.
Yeah, nice. and in your own studio.
I know, strange.
You've never been on a podcast before, have you?
I have.
Have you?
I had my own for a while. Then I've been on mine with Neil. It was like the original social media ruins everything.
That's right, of course you have. Of course you were on social media ruins everything.
I was about to say, because you were like the producer on that.
Honestly, it's a great start, isn't it? You've never been on a podcast before. I have, and you were on it as well.
It's a pretty special occasion because I've interviewed you before. You're the first guest to return back to Pop Culture Patter.
That's right,
the first time.
It won't be the last. I think a guest you've had on will come back on. There's loads of stuff you could follow up on.
Yeah,
it'd be pretty cool.
It's also worth noting that I think you're probably the youngest podcast studio owner.
Just comes part and parcel
in the world. We'll just go out and say that.
Comes part and parcel with the. I don't know.
I'm saying he's never been on a. I'm asking him if he's been on a podcast before. Again, I'm an idiot because he has. He was on one 18 years ago.
Yeah.
He was a regular guest on a podcast 18 years ago.
And that podcast was your own?
It was my own.
So the Tartan podcast?
It was, he would come on and do movie reviews.
Aye.
Yeah.
As a 5-year-old.
There you go, Pop Culture Patter.
Exactly. Yeah. And because you produce a lot of podcasts here as a podcast studio, do you have time to listen to any podcasts out with this studio?
I'm really bad for it. I used to listen to podcasts all the time. I don't really anymore. The odd one in the car sometimes, but in general it's more kind of video that I consume rather than just audio. So if I'm going to listen to a podcast, it'll kind of be the video component with it. I have quote unquote view loads on Instagram and stuff like that through short form.
Yeah.
Attention
span's just been whiled away.
Wow.
Disgusting, isn't it?
He was an executive producer of No Agenda.
Yes.
He was an exec. Yeah. So No Agenda is a really long running podcast. It's been going since about 2007 and it's co-hosted by the guy that co-invented podcasting as a medium, a guy called Adam Curry.
All right. You mentioned him on your previous episode.
So he's still got his podcast by a guy called John C. Dvorak running. Cam was an executive producer one week on that, so he can actually put that on his LinkedIn profile.
Brilliant.
And the funny thing is that they'll vouch and stuff for you too. If you send them like an email, they'll be like, mind that time just casually executive produced one of your episodes. They'll be like, oh yeah, and they'll like do a wee reference or something like that. It's fun. It's a cool way of like building a community and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they've got a really interesting system known as the value for value system. So you provide them with some kind of value, may it be monetary, graphic design wise, giving them sources and clips for their podcasts and stuff like that, and in return they'll sort of give you a shout out and all that kind of stuff. It's a really cool
time, talent and treasure.
It's a really, really, really cool way of building up a community.
Yep. Yeah.
quite naturally as well.
That's class. Didn't know that.
Yeah. So their audience is like literally bought in, you know, because they can give money to the show. But the time, talent and treasure, so they might come across a really good news story and get clips from it and send it into the guys. It's an audio only. It's a total old school, like purist podcast. There's no video component, nothing on Instagram.
Right.
You can barely find out what one of the guys looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I know, because it's Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak. There's like barely any pictures of John C. Dvorak from the current day. I think he's like 70 something.
He's nearly 80. He's an old guy, man.
He's like a really old guy, and there's like loads of pictures from him maybe back in like the early 2000s and stuff, but you can't really figure out what he looks like now, which kind of, it's really weird when that's the case, because the one thing is it's like it's cool. You know, it's OG, it's kind of almost under the radar because it's not video. But the second component is when you're listening to an audio-only podcast and you haven't seen the person, for me, all I can think about is like, what do they look like? What's the voice to this face, or face to this voice?
And I think a lot of people were like that with you for a while, weren't they? Because you kind of didn't release a lot of information.
Oh man, it was terrible. And back then it was easy to be, I suppose you can still be anonymous online now, but certainly back there it was a lot easier because there was no social media as we now know. I mean, Facebook wasn't a thing in 2005. Wow. YouTube wasn't a thing in 2005. You know, so it was very easy to stay anonymous. We had Flickr.
Right.
And if you want for this video, I'll send you some photos from back in the day from my Flickr account.
Yeah.
So Flickr was a photo sharing website, not an app or anything like that. Apps weren't the things. So if you were into your photography, you would upload your photographs to it. And that's how I want to say outed. Doxed. I was doxed on Flickr because I was speaking at a conference down south. I maybe mentioned this last time I was on, but there was a photographer there. He was taking pictures and uploading them to Flickr and tagging the pictures. And of course I get tagged in a picture. So
were you raging, or were you just like...
I wasn't thrilled about it, I've got to be honest with you. But a couple of months later I was in California for the global sort of podcast, the first global podcast expo. And I ended up, it was one of those ones where folk were walking about. There was no phone cameras, so folk had like digital cameras, and everybody was taking pictures. So you were posing for group shots with other podcasters. So it was kind of out then anyway. So basically, like, no agenda.
What someone looks like when you can't see them, it's funny.
It's mental to think as well. 2005 to me doesn't feel like that long ago, but it was nearly, 18 years ago?
It's 18 years, aye.
I think I was only 15 at the time, and when you were saying there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, I was kind of like, fucking hell. Aye.
It's hard to imagine that world. I mean, you didn't have a smartphone with all the apps of the day pinging you all the time. So the fact that, and I know we talked about this the last time, but it's still when I actually stop and think about it in scenarios like this, the fact that podcasting as a medium grew up out of that world is incredible, but it's also kind of indicative to the fact that, you know, people now are still referring to podcasting as something that's quite new, thinking it's maybe 4 or 5 years old as a form of content, but it really isn't. 2004. But it was before its time. It was too soon, too early.
Yeah.
And it did take over 10 years for it to probably become a thing.
I had nothing to be sort of counterculture to.
No.
Everything was still long form and stuff like that. It didn't have anything to really bounce back against in terms of media online.
No, I mean, you were bouncing back against traditional radio.
Aye.
Because it was the video component to podcast didn't come along a lot later, but you were bouncing back against that, you know, corporate, particularly in America, where all the corporate, all the radio's pretty much corporate, apart from NPR, which is sort of publicly owned, but it's dead commercialised, and podcasting was freeing folk from that. So as a listener, you want to get bombarded with ads. But as a content creator, you want to have to comply with the FCC or any regulatory body. And Adam Curry's original podcast, The Daily Source Code, he had a thing in it. It's like, transmitters, we don't need no stinking transmitters. And the whole idea was anybody could be a broadcaster.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's by the by.
That's by the by.
But
were podcasts like born out of blogs, or were blogs kind of around the same time?
Blogs predate podcasts by, I mean, blogs were, you're talking about late 90s, and I could be wrong, and it might be a bit earlier than that, but certainly I first became aware of blogs late late 90s, but the mechanism that allows a podcast to be a podcast rather than just a bit of media that's sitting on a website is the mechanism that made blogs possible. RSS, really simple syndication, and it was Adam Curry, and I got this wrong in your podcast. I said Dave Rubin. It wasn't Dave Rubin. He's a sort of right-wing political commentator. It was Dave Weiner and Adam Curry. They got together.
Contrasting.
Well, they got together and they figured out how to code the RSS feed to include an enclosure or a pod in which media could be placed, like an MP3 file, and hence podcast as a term was born. So there we go, a wee bit of history.
For those who don't know, that you guys own and run the Podcast Studio Glasgow, which is where we record all of our sessions and have, apart from one, I think I recorded on my own. And you've not been here for too long. I think it was October last year, was it you moved in? Or
No, we've been here a year.
Yeah.
A year, really?
It was May.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had it in my head that it was October.
No, well, we
October
opened.
was the old place, was it not?
Yeah,
That's when
yeah.
we moved into the old places in October.
We signed the lease on the old place in October 2021 and moved in the last day of October 2021.
That's right.
And that was in the Templeton building, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Good old Templeton building with the train tracks. Love it. Great. So much fun.
I'm still genuinely triggered and traumatised, which is such a shame. Like, even the thought of going to West, which is in that building, we were 2 floors above the West Brewery, the original studio. Even the thought of going back there, like, even the thought, even the thought of, like, I don't like going over there now, and it's a shame because I loved that building. I had an office in it years and years ago, and then when we decided we were going to have a studio, that's the first place I thought, and we found a place that we thought would be ideal for a studio, and we took it on. And
Did you talk about that last time?
No, we didn't talk about that.
No,
I don't even know if you want to talk about it.
I don't know if I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But genuinely, that experience
totally,
genuinely destroyed my health.
Yeah.
And there's no hyperbole behind that. I mean, the last time I was on your podcast, that afternoon I was going into hospital, and I did go into hospital, and I was in hospital for just over a day, and now I'm waiting to go back into hospital, and a lot of it goes back to the experience with that first podcast studio. So the fact that this place is still going is testament to him and I's tenacity, and you will not fucking stop us having a podcast studio in Glasgow.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And was this place one of many places that you went to view after, or was this just the one place that
we're viewing other spaces? Quite quickly we were like, right, we're gonna have to do one of two things: move out or get this place, the other place, sorted for audio purposes. But obviously we'd signed the lease, all that kind of shit, all the paperwork and everything. But this is the first place, because it's literally like a 5-minute walk, so this was like the first place. Came and viewed a space, the floor above. 206, and it was pretty much the exact same. I think this is slightly bigger.
This is slightly bigger.
Oh, really?
But yeah.
Just in terms of this back bit there. Weirdly, I don't know how that is, that you think the floor plan would be the same.
No, it's over the other side. 206 is over there. 206, so 106 is over there. 206 is above it.
I swear, maybe
I'm pretty sure
was.
I've got a picture of the door, because remember we had a couple of weeks ago we had the band in.
That was this is 111.
Was it 206?
That makes sense.
That's funny. I thought it was directly above us.
No, it was over. It was that side of the corridor, and it was a nice big boxy room, but we felt it's not really. The problem was, we've not mentioned what the problem was with the Templeton building and the White Studio. It was the trains.
Yeah.
The train track butted up against
for us,
the
it's
building.
just like common knowledge now. If you're on that side of Templeton, if you're on that side of Templeton building, apologies about the trains from people that have experienced it.
It was
because even if you're without wanting to get into it, but I think even if you are an office with the trains going past all the time, it's going to be a fucking nightmare.
Eventually
anyway.
you'd be able to tune it out, but I think there'd still be moments you'd be on the phone. I mean, I don't know whether you've heard of Cy Ferry, but he does.
Yes.
Is it
Fuck, that's right.
on the ball?
He's
I bumped into him, and Liddell just up the road, and I spoke to him, and He goes, aye, we've just moved into the
studio for his own show and stuff like that.
He says, we're hoping to record the podcast in there. And I'm like, mate, good luck. And I told him that, and he's like, you could see his eyes, like, but he's like, well, it's close enough to the pub, isn't it? Which it is obviously, because West is in the same building. But, and the funny thing is, when we were in there, West wasn't open because of COVID. So we never actually
you never got the benefit
of it before we moved out. But as Cam says, we went to see a place at one of the other rooms in this building. The problem with this, and it, you know, I'm looking at the comfort monitor so I can see our set, that this looks, I've got to be honest, really fucking good, right? Does, yep. Even if we say so ourselves. But it is just a big empty room with sort of magnolia walls. So when you come into a space like this, it's hard to visualise it.
Definitely.
Whereas the other space, the original studio, we went in and we were like, oh, this is amazing.
That's what I was going to say. I think the building, the Templeton building sells itself. This kind of sells a more like, it's more like that has an aesthetic and a quote unquote, I hate to use the fucking vibe.
Aye.
Already attached to it, whereas a building like this is just like,
all right,
it's a business centre.
When clients come in and when folk, or when I'm walking folk up the corridor to the studio, it's like folk either say always consistently one of two things: I never knew this building existed, despite the fact I've lived in the area and driven past it, or this looks like an old school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And out there it does, it looks like an old school. It's kind of got the wood panel walls and stuff like that. Perfect purposes for us.
And on the surface, you wouldn't think so, because part of what our vision for the podcast studio Glasgow was, it aesthetically, that had to look great. And the room over there, aesthetically, like out the box, out the wrapper, stick on. This is amazing. Open, not kind of closed in, not a pod for sure, but kind of like New York loft. It was a New York vibe. We had a guy from New York. Yeah, and he said it. Our second client over there, a guy called Felix Levine, who's got a podcast called Where's This Going, in it, which has exploded since he was in our studio. Obviously, because he came in and he's like, this space is amazing, and he's going, this has got a Brooklyn loft vibe, and you know, and it did have that vibe with the strip wooden floors and the sort of exposed whitewashed brick walls. So obviously, I mean, aesthetically it looked great, but you had to treat this room for audio to cut the reverb down, because the sound in here is nice and flat, because we've done that. Over there it was more of a challenge. But I think as well that basically everything that made that space over there look great and kind of give that vibe, that New York vibe, had to be completely taken away because of what we wanted to achieve there. Massive stage like theatre curtains were put across these great big massive windows. All the light was cut out. Around the actual recording space as well, it was all just curtains and sort of eventually curtains in. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kind of around the table, there was curtains around it, suspended plywood with sound treated and stuff like that. Everything that we wanted from that originally was sort of stripped away. Yeah. Because we didn't want sound panels up. You know, you see studios that have got, and there's nothing wrong with it and they serve a purpose, but the kind of foam sound treatment, and they come in 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre squares. I forgot we got all that done as well. You buy a big massive box, and it does like quite a big area. So we got loads of them, and we got the biggest sheets of thick plywood that we could get. We got a mate of ours to pick them up in his van. We humped them up the 3 floors, on the stairs. He built frames for them, mounted them on the walls. We sprayed. We to do all of that. We just left all that stuff in when we moved, because we just fucked off and just left it all. Aye. Well, we're not going to get into all the stuff with the landlord and that, but we just fucked off and left it. So basically, the aesthetic of it was a contributing factor to it not going to work. Yeah, it was a weird kind of double-edged Like,
snake feeding on itself.
See if it was just a studio where you're just posing and it was all like for photos, and you wanted to create a fake podcast studio and just take photographs in it. It would have been absolutely.
If you want,
Or do the audio in post or something like that.
Somewhere else, just dub it later, you know.
Just like, imagine the work with that, man. That'd be fucking ridiculous. But if you're wanting a photography studio, the Templeton building is like perfect for it. It's a fucking brilliant building, man. It's really, really nice. It's just shite.
But
to the
to go back to our choice in here, you know, it's interesting. We're talking about Felix Levine. He came over from New York, booked the studio because he was interviewing a comedian called Adam Rowe. He's a Scouse comedian who's also got a really successful podcast, which the name escapes me at the minute, but it's a really successful podcast. So he was on tour and he was in Glasgow. Felix Levine came over, booked our studio to interview Adam Rowe. And it was interesting talking to Adam. He and his business partners, they decided to take on it's a space like this, in an industrial unit just outside Liverpool, and it's a kind of like a place with offices like this, and that's what they did. So they took that on and got it all dressed, you know, for their podcast.
They've got a pretty cool set.
They do. They've got a great set, and it just shows you that, you know, that what you think aesthetically you're going to need to have for a podcast studio could actually be counterintuitive, which was our experience. And then you come into a space like this and you go, that's a bit, there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
But it works better because then you're not dealing with trains, you're not dealing with a bad reverb, and you're able to dress it. And we're actually able to get a lot more, for all this room's smaller than what we had, we're actually able to get a lot more in here, 2 sets.
You wouldn't be able to build a set like this in somewhere like the Templeton.
You wouldn't.
Because you wouldn't have that vision to be like, we should hang this stuff, we should get the boards up, we should get a television on that, let the room have its own space and stuff. And it would be... Yeah, you wouldn't have any of this, I don't think, at all.
Yeah, and I remember you saying when you moved in you heard the trains, but did you actually record many podcasts in that studio? Or was it pretty much you got the vibe straight away that you were like...
I mean, you can find it, if MD's watching or listening to your podcast, if you go on to YouTube and search for Felix Levine, Adam Rowe, you'll find the episode that was recorded in our space. Felix Levine gives us a shout out and he thanks to the guys in Podcast Studio Glasgow, brilliant space and all that. As he's saying that, there's a train going by. But he didn't notice it. And I remember messaging him later on and explaining, and he's like, "Oh man, I never even noticed." So we had a couple of clients booked, and then
ironically enough, the first client in that space was talking about trains.
It was
fucking ridiculous.
Perfect.
Could not write it.
It was the government advisory body that sort of monitors the performance of the train companies in the UK. And
wow.
The irony.
You want some sound effects added in?
Exactly.
We actually said that at the time.
Like he said to me, he said, "Yeah, I'm probably going to add in just at the start of the conversation the sound of trains going by." That's what he said before recording. I'm thinking to myself, mate, you won't fucking need to.
We'll hold the microphone out the window, man. There you go.
We got there was a really good booking. Well, I think it was more of an inquiry first of all. From a company down south, and they wanted to know if they could live stream from the venue, and that was one of the things that you could. Yeah. You can live stream from here, and you know that was always the plan for the studio. So we said yeah, and there was a bunch of phone calls and emails and video calls just showing on the space, and it turned out it was for Amazon Music who were doing a Twitch live stream, and the live stream was a live watch along of the new Biffy Clyro documentary, and they wanted Biffy Clyro to be in the studio for the watching of it. So we were buzzed about that, but equally, and in fact, I've still got the video. There's video clips of him and I testing like the setup and all that, like where they were going to sit, because we had arranged the space in a slightly different way than we normally had it, and it was, we thought it'll be fine and all that, it'll be absolutely fine. The guys from the band came in, they were absolutely brand new, really, really nice guys. So they were sat at the table, they were sitting chatting and everything, you know, and then it was time to go live, and the drummer, I don't know their names, I'm terrible, but the drummer put the headphones on just as a train was going by, and he just went, "What the fuck is that?"
Fuck.
And I was like, oh no, it's fine. He's going, is that the underground? I says, no, it's the low level trains. I says, it's fine, the mics won't pick it up. And to be fair, they didn't. They didn't, but like you just couldn't have clients coming in and sitting, wanting to record a podcast and putting headphones on and just literally every 5 minutes hearing a train going past and the vibration getting picked up and the sound getting picked up.
I know, because the wooden floors and all that's just bouncing. You would have had to put rugs everywhere.
There's rugs
There
everywhere.
was rugs everywhere.
Cam's talking about the curtains. It's the curtains that are over there that block out the natural light. But with them, there was 2 layers of them. So we got 2 curtain rails fitted 6 inches apart. So there was 2 curtains closed and then another curtain rail, another 2 curtains.
What a job
closed.
that was getting all them. Because they were high
horrendous.
ceilings, man.
Aye, higher
they
than
were
here.
high ceilings.
Aye.
Higher than this?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Jesus.
But
These
do you know
are
what?
pretty high ceilings,
It
really.
was
Like, probably.
When you
this
take
is
away that barrier thing.
aye, you see, I mean, it probably wasn't much higher than, anyway.
I don't know, in my mind, thinking back, it was like fucking a 2-story building height kind of thing. I'm like, fuck. Just, you know, that way where you like over egg what is going on in your mind, and you're like, those ceilings were fucking massive, and the train was shaking the window. And
And the thing, just thinking back, and just sit and cast my mind back, you know, in the one hand, it was an amazing experience to open a podcast studio 18 years after I'd started podcasting, having my oldest son, who at the age of 5 had been a regular guest, quote unquote, on my podcast back then, opening a studio with him and the 2 of us having that opportunity space. So that was a buzz, right? And it was a great experience, obviously undermined by the stress that we were put under trying to make it all work because of the sound of the trains. But now being in here and seeing what we've managed to achieve in here, it's like we're really, really proud.
Well, when I look
we've
back
done.
to the first time I came in, it looks completely different. Like it felt like you were constantly making changes every time I came in. And I know that you said that I'm probably noticing more things, but you've tried to perfect this set.
yeah, well, this set's completely different from when you first came in.
Yeah.
And,
It's recorded here originally.
and I think as well, like in the beginning, the set that you used first was just sort of these chairs and then these blue.
It was more the magnolia walls were more prominent.
And they were portrait, but that other set was somewhat of a kind of just like a fuck it, we've got the space, we'll make another set. And now looking at this space, this is like the flagship one now. This one is like, you could take this anywhere and show this to anyone and they'd be like, that's fucking, it's pretty cool, man.
We're really proud of it. It was just a kind of flash of inspiration to do this with the boards.
And I think, and what really sort of brung the whole of this set together is these chairs.
Aye.
These chairs are class, man. I love these chairs at home as well.
I'd seen them one weekend. My partner and I had been in IKEA, and you know, IKEA's got the sort of sets, you know, showing off living rooms, and these chairs with the side tables were in a thing, and I was like, oh, they look really, really good. So I think in the Monday I said to Cam, she'll go and have a look, and went in to be look at them, and because we didn't have these originally. It was a sofa and an armchair.
It's the sofa that's next door in the office, and and the armchair that we just fucking chucked down the back. Like, it's a good armchair as well, man, but just didn't really know anyone that could take it, so we just we just carried it down the stairs.
We got it from I'm sure somebody else would have taken it.
Yeah, it was Italian leather, man.
Designer,
fucking
designer.
nice. We just chucked it down the stairs, and someone probably came along and picked it up.
Because there was not up with it. I'd seen it in Shelter, one of the charity shops. Shelter's great for all that kind of stuff, and it was for the original studio before we moved in. The coffee table.
Mind the coffee table that was just basically a barn door.
It was an old school farm barn door, right, with the metal studs,
nice,
with the hinges and everything. And somebody taken one of them and put these like ornate wooden legs on, and created a coffee table out of it. You struggled, like 2 people struggled to lift this thing, and that's no joke. Man, it was heavy. So we had that in the old studio. That was we're going to have a set with all that, and then looking back, it's like, so basically we got rid of that.
Italian leather paired with a barn
A
door.
rustic French barn door coffee table. It
know
just
about that
didn't
one.
really work. But I just sent an email to the building managers over there and just said, look, can you put a blind CC out email just saying, look, we've got that, we'll leave it outside in the corridor. And I think somebody came to it that day. You know, I'm sure it did some with their turn, you know.
'Cause it was cool. It was cool, man. It was sometimes impractical because they still they had the iron studs of the barn door still in.
You
So
could
they
have put a plate on it.
Aye, I didn't have
really?
the width to put
So
a
it's
plate
just
on it.
no
Just be
purpose.
wobbling
Yeah.
with the big sort of rusty iron bolts for the hinges and stuff, you know. So it wasn't practical. It was all these wee things, and it's been that 18 months of sort of learning and tweaking, and we feel we've got the place that, like the set. There's maybe just a couple of things we tweak. I don't know, but you know, I think the last thing we added was this coffee table, just to add that foreground, something in the foreground, because you need something in the foreground, the midground, and obviously the background. But it's been 18 months of sort of tweaking and refining and obsessing. I don't feel, you know, what was I like? You'd come in the morning and I'd already been in, I'd been here feverishly, my eye twitching, all that. I'm just going to try moving these lights.
Yeah, just doing stuff all the time.
That hasn't happened for ages because I feel we've got it nailed now, you know.
Yeah, and as much as you were talking about the Templeton building have the aesthetic that people would walk in and be like, wow, people are still coming into this and being like, wow.
But I think as well, I think it's part shock factor too, because you walk along this kind of corridor that's old, it's got the lino floors and stuff like that. You come in here and you're like, what the fuck?
It's like getting into a TV set.
Yeah, because it sort of pairs with the fact that people come into this building and be like, I had no idea this was here. And at the same time, we're growing something in here that is just completely bewildering to folk, even on this floor.
Oh, because we've invited some of the folk from the floor in, you know, or the Vastas. What is it you guys doing there? So we always were proud to bring folk in and let them see. And everybody always has the same response, you know, is that wow, and they're looking about and, you know, particularly when we get this set finalised.
Yeah.
I mean, behind the scenes, you know, there's cables. Where I'm sitting just now, it's like, oh, Jesus, there's cables everywhere. But that's just the nature of the beast because it's a modular space. So the minute it's set up for this set, but if it was set up for the table, the cables would be moved over there and out the road a bit more.
Unless you've got like somewhere you can lift the floor up. Could you imagine you had kind of like paneling like that on the floor? That'd be kind of cool, and you could like sort of just wire everything underneath.
Because you get those little boxes that hide all the cables and all that. But that would be a fortune, I think, to sort. So
see, to go back to your original question, did we get the chance to listen to podcasts?
Yeah.
Which was about an hour ago, wasn't it? So Cam's response was kind of not really so much, but you'll watch some stuff. I still listen to podcasts.
Who do you listen to?
So I listen to yours. I don't always make it all the way through your conversations, but that's just one of these things where I've maybe ended my journey. I always listen to podcasts in the car, and then the next time I'm in the car there's a new episode or something else. But the one you did with Ross, really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a cool one.
Hearing it, because I've spoken to Ross a couple of times, and just hearing, I could hear the difference in the guy.
Oh, you know, definitely, man.
Obviously, there was no video associated with it, but I heard it, I could hear. So I listened to yours, I was listening to Christine's Unmuzzled at 67 in the drive-in today. I still listen to...
New episode coming out tonight.
Is there? Right.
There we go, free plug for Christine.
Still listening to No Agenda, Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak's one. Listen to Heart and Hand. What else to listen to? I listen to a couple of alternative news media ones, you know, alt news, because I don't always trust the mainstream news, so I'm always interested to get another. But podcasts are still a big part of my listening throughout the week.
Aye, and it's been great to come in here to podcast and meet you guys, because you know, I can see how buzzing you are for this space and for the medium itself. Like, as much as you're not listening to podcasts, you're passionate about the people coming in. And the clients here all love it. They all come back. And it's just a place of how more clients can get
I think
here.
For me, it's sometimes what excites me more, not so much the medium, but the production is what really excites me. And meeting clients and sort of creating a nice relationship with folk and having other clients meet other clients, that's for me that fucking blows my mind, man. When that happens, I really enjoy that.
It's a good buzz, isn't it?
So I think just although I don't listen to them, the production side and the kind of setting up video cameras and lighting, audio engineering is really what kind of gets me going more so than just listening.
Yeah. The production side of things, I mean, you know, you can create a podcast. Anybody can create a podcast studio. Like, there's absolutely no doubt about that. You just need to find the right space, put a bit of money into it, the right gear, or not even the right gear. You can just have gear, like audio and video gear, and you can say you've got a podcast studio, and that's absolutely fine. I think what sets our studio apart, I think there's two things, maybe three. One of them is the 18 years experience, which I always bang on about, right? And we joke about 18 years experience or what, you know what I mean? But 18 years experience with the medium of podcasting, plus, in my case, videography and other bits and pieces that I've done throughout my career. So we've got 18 years experience. I know for a fact there's no other podcast studio in the world that has 18 years of podcast production experience.
Oh,
right?
So I can change.
You can change it
From, I think I say they're the only podcast studio in Britain.
Well,
so I can change that to the world.
No, I would be interested to challenge anybody to come forward and say, no, I've been producing podcasts longer than you, and I also own a podcast studio. That's the thing, right? It's not just being a podcast producer, but it's being a podcast producer with a studio.
Yeah.
To help other people produce their podcasts. So that's the one thing that sets us apart. I would say the other thing that sets us apart is, I had it by osmosis, Cam's now got it, is that kind of obsession with the quality of the client's end product. You know, we don't want anybody to come in and use this space, whether even if it's just an hour recording some audio, or whether it's a 2-hour session with 3 cameras.
Or you're just reacting to TikToks
or you're just
like
sitting recording yourself reacting to TikToks. We don't want anybody to leave here and not have the best possible looking and sounding audio and video files. What they go on to do it, you know, whether we're involved with the post-production, sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, but we don't want anybody to leave. It would be the worst thing in the world if a client was to receive the files from us and they open it up and they go, oh fuck, that's shit.
Yeah.
The only thing that can make the content that comes out of here shit, in my opinion, is whether the content itself is shit. But we will do our damnedest to make sure that it looks and sounds great, even if the content's shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, sorry to interrupt, but those are the two things I think that kind of set our studio space apart.
And I'm going to add you guys to the third, because you come into the studio completely blind. You've started a podcast, you've got no idea what you're doing. You just think you're going to sit down and record, but the information you give the clients, the help that you give them, you don't push them out the door. It's not like, right, you've got an hour, like a band practice, I'm chapping your door to be like, right, next band's in. It's very much, you get a bit of chat and rapport with the clients that come in. Everybody loves coming in here. And it's a real good space that you've created. And it's one of those things that I know I'm always sharing stuff on the studio on my social media, but it's because I'm passionate about the studio and I believe in you guys as well, and it's that you guys believe in me, and I want you to be successful because you bloody deserve it. We're talking about Ross being on yesterday. Like, I took the dog a walk for a 4.5 mile walk, and it's cleared my head, and I got really emotional on the walk, and I was like, people were sending me messages being like, loved that episode, it's great, very powerful stuff. It's nice to hear two guys opening up about mental health. And I did a live and I just ranted about my own mental health, but it was windy as fuck. So I don't know what it is with me in lives. It's just like a curse.
No, they're tough, man. They're tough.
But it's the belief that you guys have shown in me as well has been amazing. I was listening to our episode because I was like, I don't want to ask the same questions and tread over the same water. And I was like, feels like a different person. You know what I mean? Like your
progress is I mean, I don't want to go into this, you know, you and I talked about it off air, if you like, but we had the idea for a podcast for a local institution, let's say, and my plan was that, you know, the studio would be involved with production. We would recommend you as the host.
Wow.
You know, no problem at all. We recommend. Like, I think Callum would, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Would be an ideal host for this podcast. They've come back and said that they don't plan to add podcasts to their marketing at present, which is a massive mistake. Huge mistake. Everybody could benefit from having a podcast as their marketing. But you know, from your point of view as a host, you come on leaps and bounds, but your thing is you've been open to feedback.
Yeah.
And I think the first conversation you and I had was me saying to you, can I give you a wee bit of feedback? Which I hate being that knob, you know. Excuse me, do you mind if I just give you a bit of feedback? Who the fuck are you? Fuck off. So to be fair to you, you were like,
fucking
no.
feedback on this, you cunt.
Exactly. I want some fucking. No, to be fair to you, you were open to it.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever I said, and you took it on board, and aye.
I'm trying. That it's so hard not being like, yep, and because it is an audio only at this point, and all the tips that you have given me, and you have been teaching me a lot of the behind the scenes stuff as well. Been volunteering in here to help you guys, and it's been such an amazing experience for me as a person as well. So it's the relationship that I have with you guys I value very much,
and you get to see what goes on behind the scenes when we are doing post-production. You know, I mean, I know we're I'm tooting our own horns, but I'm sure you'll back us up. But as the attention to detail, the fact that you and I worked in one I think it was at the end of last week, where one of the participants that I wasn't happy with how their mic sounded. Now, I wasn't here on the day that we were recording. Not that would necessarily have made any difference, but remember I put the head on, I'm like, I'm not happy with that at all. And what was it like? It was like we were trying everything, and we nailed it in the end. We got it right, and we had to fix a wee bit of the video. But you see that we're not messing about when we say we don't want anybody to leave here and not be 100% happy with the quality that they get from the studio. Yeah.
And you have recently kind of went through a wee bit of a rebrand of the kind of social media and stuff like that. How do you think that's went? Has there been any feedback yet?
I got loads of good feedback from it. Loads of good feedback, from clients, from folk that aren't clients, from sort of neighbouring, like sort of digital companies and stuff like that. It's been good. It's been great. And I think in general as well, it's just nicer to look at than the old one.
The old logo was kind of rushed. Do you remember that?
Yeah, just me. I just had a sort of an AI, an Illustrator file with loads of different designs, on black and white. So it was just the bare bones of stuff. And then we were like, right, well, we're moving in next week. Let's get a logo done. And I was like, I showed you this file I had with all these different ideas, we'll just go with that one. And then added colour to it, and that was it. And then from then on, that was what it was. We didn't really spend too much time thinking about it. It was only until you went to the bars and were like, should change this.
I mean, it was after the week that, as Cam says, it was a trip to the bars. I hadn't been to the bars for probably 30 years. And my partner had said that they're doing a Hong Kong market style thing. Do you want to go? And I was like, the bars, man. I just always remembered it being a bit rank, a bit shady, and you never really felt particularly safe. But we went to it, and I was messaging him, going, this is amazing. And I'm taking photographs of stuff and going, that would look great in the studio. It was just such a buzz. And the kind of culmination was there's a magazine stall, Phase, I think it's Phase they're called.
Right Mags, is it maybe Right Mags? Or
Right,
is it?
yeah, Right, it's Right Mags.
Right Mags. Shout out to Right Mags, and there's actually a couple of Right Mags that are now in the set in here. So yeah, the culmination was going to her sort of wee shop and getting a bunch of stuff, and then thinking, wait a minute, the bar is cool as fuck.
Yeah.
And you could throw a stone for our studio and hit the bar. It's literally just down the road. And it kind of got me thinking, the East End of Glasgow is starting to go through that resurgence. It's getting a bit of life put back into it. I'm not saying it's going to end up all hoity-toity. I don't think it will, and I hope it won't. But we're at the heart of Bridgeton, right? But the crossroads of Bridgeton and the Carlton, it's like one of the most deprived areas in Europe. The life expectancy here is like worse than anywhere in Europe, you know. But I think it's going to start to go through a nice wee bit of resurgence. And I was like, wait a minute, man, we're in this mad janky building like the Abercromby Business Centre, man, and it's got extreme gym, it's crazy graffiti style wall outside. I was like, wait a minute, we're in the heart of what could be one of the coolest parts of Glasgow.
Yeah.
So
we turned into gentrification wankers.
Yeah. So we decided, you know, we just sat we sat next door in the office and had a chat about it, and we were like, let's take Podcast Studio Glasgow and just abbreviate it to PSG. And then it was like, well, PSG could be loads of other things, like pretty sound guys, pretty sweet gear. We come up with a whole bunch of meanings for PSG. You know, I had a couple of ideas for colours. Cam went into Illustrator, started to pull together a new logo with the colour palettes and all that, and it just jumped out into that sort of shocking pink, which somebody's pointed out is similar to the People Make Glasgow. And it kind of is, but there was no conscious decision to do that.
It's just it's annoying because it's such a simple but really striking design choice theme. The Tron Theatres is actually slightly similar to it as well. I realised. Really? But there's a square and it just says Tron Theatre in sort of capitals. But no wonder folk are using it, man, because it's a really striking sort of colour scheme.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's what worked so well for the People Make Glasgow. It's just that pink that just brought it to life.
I preferred the Mr. Smiley, Mr. Men guy for back in the 80s and that.
I've never seen that. I need to have a look at that.
That's old school. but we thought, well, they kind of rebrand to PSG, you know, so it's still Podcast Studio Glasgow, but it can mean other things. But then it was us thinking, well, it's not just, you know, we've got a separate office, we've got a separate business that we run together that does marketing, branding, all that type of stuff. Let's just put it all into the one PSG pot, you know. So, you know, I've been producing marketing content for it feels like my entire working life. Cam get involved with that 2020 via another business I was running at the time. So why don't we just lump everything into the one pot? It's PSG, to the point where the separate company's website now just redirects to the studio's website,
right?
Because I'd rather get folk in here, go talk to them about why you need a podcast for their marketing, all the benefits of having a podcast, the marketing, the short form content you can harvest out of your long form podcast, and sell the other stuff that we offer off the back of the PSG banner.
Because that's the one thing that a lot of people might not know, is that it is a podcast studio, but you offer so many different services, and you know, even yourself, Cam, to testament to you for all the digital stuff that you do and the logo design, and like you've had to teach yourself to do that, and like that gives you a real creative output as well. Yeah,
definitely. It's a production studio at the end. If depending on if you want to see it that way as well, it can be. The space is modular enough that you can use it for any purpose you'd like, and the sort of technology that's in here can be used for like sort of bringing up clips on that television. There's
a guy coming in to shoot a popular Scottish TikTokers booked the studio and our post-production service to do TikTok videos tomorrow.
Right, okay.
And we've got a client in this afternoon. I've worked with them since 2013. We do all of their they sell, it's kind of, the products are dull. I don't want to go into too much detail, but they sell products that are essential to a particular industry. And I've been, and now latterly Cam has been making their the YouTube videos we walk through as demonstrations, how-tos on all these products for 10 years. Before that, even before that, I was the main digital creative guy for probably the biggest independent e-commerce company in its sector in the UK. They're Glasgow, just based just outside of Glasgow. So I produced all of their digital marketing content. So we never stopped doing that just because we all opened the podcast studio. So it's that whole thing. It just makes sense to lump it all in together. PSG, it's a digital creative hub in the East End of Glasgow. You can come in, hire it for your own stuff, consult with us, because we've got a lot of experience across the digital marketing space. And and if you don't, that's absolutely fine.
What kind of services do you offer out with just the studio, like just the podcasting?
Video, whether it be on your premises or in here. Branding, like complete rework of branding, from like the logo to leaflets and print work and stuff like that, business cards. just general consultation. We've had folk in here consult on where they want to take a podcast, but then where that podcast can be used out with, like you're saying, short form, stuff like that. TikTok and Instagram reels, all that kind of stuff. Like the dark side of the internet, perhaps some would say.
What?
The dark side, where you, as in reels and stuff like that.
Okay, aye.
Because you're, maybe.
I thought you meant
maybe edit that slightly. That doesn't sound great.
abducting folk and selling them on the dark web.
Come into the studio.
Dark side of the internet. Right, okay, cut that.
I can't probably cut that. What else? Loads of stuff, man.
I mean,
You could come to us with an entire sort of idea and ethos behind your business and brand, and we'll take that to every single platform and medium that you want: photography, video, Instagram, print, anything.
It's one that we forget to talk about, but product photography was our speciality niche for a couple of years. We got pretty good at it.
Fucking great fun, man. It's really, really good.
It's super challenging as a discipline. Like, good quality product photography is a lot harder than you think. So we've in fact in this room we did well. I had a studio for a wee while in my flat. Did I talk about that in the last time?
I don't think so.
I think we've just talked. Get into it, man. It's pure cringe. But needs must at the time. But in here we did a complete reworking of a company's entire product catalogue.
Yeah.
Every single product that they sell, we photographed, and I'd love it to have been really cool home audio gear or like fashion. It wasn't. It was the dullest stuff. It was connectors, like electronic connectors. What a challenge to photograph, you know. And it was literally, I remember when we're setting it up, it's, you know, we've got studio strobe lights, but you know, we didn't want too much reflection because some of them were really shiny, and you know, it was just adapting, modifying the light, shaping the light to be able to take these photographs. And there was hundreds of them with a spreadsheet
pulling some of them out the bag and going like, oh fuck, it's one of these. Going like, it's one of these ones. And then slightly tweaking the light and stuff.
So we've done all that stuff, you know.
It makes it sound like a couple of jobbers, man, when you're just like loads of different things from everywhere.
But at the time it was part of the, I mean, I led that at the time, you know, because you were at uni. But for me it was just the kind of evolution of where I was going with the work that I did, you know. And at the time, or not long before that, I was running an e-commerce business, and we had to do everything ourselves from scratch. So we had to build the website, and we had to photograph all the products that we sold. It was just as simple as that. So it's one of these jobs where you learn as you're going along. And then it was like, fuck, we're actually quite good at this, and we're able to get other clients doing product photography, you know, because we had the space to do it.
And you're also doing like staff pictures and stuff like that. Like businesses are being like, can you come take pictures, headshots and stuff. Like that's another thing that is offered here. Like I think people just automatically assume it's just a podcast studio, but effectively you want clients to come in.
If you want to work with us, we'll turn our hand to anything that you deem necessary for your project.
There's not been much in terms of digital content creation, other than possibly CAD or animations that we haven't done. You know, so I'm longer than the tooth and cam, obviously, in this world, and there's no much, because I've been around since the start of social media and the whole kind of the world of marketing your business on social media via digital content. Because I've been kind of in that world for the start, there's no much I haven't done. And you had to teach yourself, because there was, you're like, literally, I mean, I remember training on these subjects like social media marketing, and now there's actual university courses you can do to learn social media marketing. It was just, when I was training on it, it was like folk had to be taught what it was and why it mattered, and now the world has accepted all these things. So there's not much we haven't turned our hand to. And if we sound like jobbers, we sound like jobbers, you know what I mean? What can you do?
And there was no YouTube videos to turn to either.
There wasn't, mate. This was the thing. It was literally like reading blogs or emailing somebody that had written a blog and asking for more information. It was crazy.
I overly rely on YouTube far too much. Like if I'm like having to build something, I'm like, right, what have I done wrong? I'll just go to YouTube and be like, see if somebody else has put a video up about it.
It's that
all
is
the
brilliant.
time.
It's fucking brilliant, man. You can basically put yourself through uni watching YouTube videos.
Definitely.
I remember a client in here said, it's funny, he was recording and it was a question like, I think he said something like, I reckon I could do anything if I watched a YouTube video on it. I reckon I could do open heart surgery if I was watching a YouTube video at the same time. Don't know if you take it that far.
No, I certainly hope not.
Obviously, if there's anybody that's listened to Mark and I's episode 4, I'm sure it was, you will know that he's had 18 years of experience in podcasting. But what was it that made you open a studio?
It was maybe not for the smartest of reasons.
Well, it came back to me. Exactly, the reason came back to me while you were talking about the original logo, because the reason the original logo was kind of rushed was the first studio. The thought of renting that out to the public was secondary to what its purposes actually were, what the planned purpose for that studio actually was, if that makes sense. So I had a podcast where a mate of mine, we called the podcast Social Media Ruins Everything. It was born in 2019. Did I talk about it in the last episode with you?
Yeah, you touched on it a wee bit slightly, but not too much.
Okay. So it was one of these germs and ideas that we had, and Cam and I were executive producing. What was at the time quite a big football fan podcast in Glasgow. We'd found the space for it to be recorded in, so we were executive producing that in 2019. And before we recorded an episode of that, my mate Neil was in Glasgow, and I was like, let's the three of us record an episode of a podcast. We didn't have a name for it, and it was afterwards I was like, social media ruins everything, because that's kind of what we talked about. So that was in 2019, and it was 2 years later that we decided we were just going to kick it off. Now, I had made a wee studio in my flat in my bedroom, so I'd given up my bedroom, had a sofa bed in the living room, and built a wee studio, and it was cool as, I've got to be honest, it was cool as fuck. It was pretty cool.
It was good, man.
And
it was really good.
We got a lot of work done out of there in the kind of 6 or 7 months that we had it. But Neil and I started this podcast, and then within a couple of episodes I'd said to Cam, look, can you sit in and help us, because we were live streaming the recording and we were getting loads of comments coming in on the live stream video, and I was getting distracted, and folk would say, it looks like you're not paying attention when Neil's talking. So I was in my flat, he was in his house, we were recording it, we were streaming separately. So eventually I said to Cam, look, can you sit in and just keep your eye on the comments and stuff? So he became producer Cam, eventually had a mic. So he was reading out comments and then interjecting. Eventually there was a camera on him. So it was the three of us. And we joked about, we should get a space and have a studio. Because you would see guys like Andrew Schultz in Flagrant 2, and he'd get his custom-made studio. Adam Rowe that I was talking about earlier, he'd him and his co-hosts had got a studio. So we were like, fuck it, man, why don't we get a studio? And we're like, what a stupid idea. So basically, once I get a stupid idea like that, and it was like, I was kind of like, no, but I've always probably wanted to have a studio. And
I remember the when we were going to see the other space, just the jokes that were flying about, like just being like, this is a nice space, mate, but how much is the rest of the floor? How much are all the other rooms here?
Because it was the kind of big overriding joke was, and we did kind of make a wee video about it, because we had a wee private, like you could sign up to Patreon, become like get behind the scenes and everything. With a wee video where basically like, we're just going to go and fucking waste this letting agent's time, because there's no way we're going to do it. But then we kind of looked at the numbers and all that, and it was sort of like, right, we can do it for social media. It'll be Social Media Ruins Everything Studio, but Cam and I can use it for our product photography and our other marketing stuff. And then we could probably hire it out. I don't know, do you think maybe folk would want to hire it out as a podcast studio. So,
originally at the time as well, it was the idea as well was that the person who did Social Media Ruins Everything with,
Neil.
Yeah, Neil. I don't know if you were naming him or not. he could bring in his like the furniture and stuff he was making and have open nights and
Yep.
stuff. Like
Yeah,
everything else, every single other idea under the sun, other than people could rent the mics in the space and record their own podcast.
Because we were quite precious about. Like, I remember Neil and I talking, and he's going, "Aye, but you're not having other folk coming in and like using our set for our podcast." And I was like, "No, we'd have a separate set that folk could rent and everything." And
oh man, mine the idea was like we'd have stuff on wheels, we'd have like fake walls on wheels and stuff.
you could roll in and all that, you know. Aye, you could roll into the background. I remember saying to my partner's niece, who it was going to be her 30th birthday, saying, you can have your birthday party in our studio. Like, it was just going to be this multi-purpose space where, like, as Cam says, Neil could bring his handmade furniture in and have open nights and sell his stuff. And
which could be pretty cool, man.
It would have
Stuff's
been
great.
but man, it was just... And
imagine
then
lugging it all up the stairs though and stuff like that. All his like his hardwood mahogany tables and stuff like that.
that would have been on him and his assistant's strength. But I think what happened was when we realised that the train thing was an issue, and then Neil came down and Ross came on an episode of our old podcast. That's how Neil and I met Ross. So he came on an episode of the podcast, and obviously the train thing was an issue, and it was just it was like the podcast episode was great and it was really funny, and Ross was really funny, but it was a shit show because of the trains. So then I think Neil was just a bit disillusioned, and he's like, I'm not fucking driving, because he lives down in Argyll, so he's like, I'm not fucking driving all the way across country, you know. So he was
just to do like an hour,
and I think we only did like 4 or 5 episodes of the podcast that we'd got the studio to podcast from, and out of them only 2 episodes Neil was actually in the studio for. We just went back to doing it remote. And rather than me being in my bedroom studio, I was in this cavernous studio with the trains going by. So yes,
you actually had worse audio.
Exactly, the audio from my bedroom was better.
Wow.
But to answer your question, that it wasn't intended to be, the sole purpose of it wasn't meant to be a publicly accessible to rent studio. That was a secondary thought. Yeah. And then here we are 18 months later in here.
And we've probably actually made this, the space is probably, well, definitely better than it ever would be if it was just for the podcast that you knew were creating.
Social media ruins everything.
Because as soon as people put trust in you to create something for them, immediately as a creative, you're like, oh fuck, right, you really up your game.
Aye.
You it's annoying, you use all your best ideas on clients.
That's a good point.
And it's sometimes it's kind of annoying sometimes, because you're like, fuck, I wish I used that one.
Aye.
But it's already done now. Especially for marketing purposes and stuff like that. So I don't think a space would be as kind of 70s talk show, you know?
No.
I know,
but
and
it's great.
I love it that it's got that vibe of 70s talk show, and that's what I think when I first, even when the first set for my first episode, I was like, this is great, and then like what?
But you brought in the light box as well that had the pop culture patter on it and stuff.
Yeah.
You should still bring that in, because you'd be able
the
to.
coffee table.
We didn't have enough peas, so we had to like borrow peas from another one.
Yeah, because some
they
of the
were
peas were smaller.
So it just looked weird.
Yeah.
Pop culture patter podcast.
Aye, so there was only, I think there was maybe
4.
2 in the box, 2 of each letter in the box.
Right.
But we needed a third one.
We should have harvested it for somewhere else.
I bring in a lot of vinyls and stuff like that, and a lot of
and like
things.
the minifigures and stuff from WWE.
Aye, so part of the reason we've got the coffee table isn't just to sort of give that visual depth, but obviously folk can bring stuff and you can decorate the set in here.
Aye.
This podcast has just sort of turned into a journey, review your journey from starting and ours as well with Other Space. Because I don't think we've ever spoken about the Other Space in length like this.
No.
And it totally does dredge up all these like memories of things that you wanted to try and do, and the emotions that were going through at the time, man. It was fucking weird.
Yeah.
It was really weird.
It was. I remember just not being able to. The day after we formally moved in, it was a Tuesday, so we moved our stuff in the Sunday. Monday was like the first full day in it, where we got like the furniture we'd ordered from Shelter delivered, other bits and pieces arrived, and then Tuesday was the first sort of proper full day in it. And the client that's in this afternoon to shoot product videos, they were in the morning because we had a wee video sort of a set just for shooting product videos and stuff in the other place. So they were in, and I was just stressed out my box, and I'm like, because there was the trains going by, and I'm like, think that'll get picked up in the mic, think that. But I remember Dawn from the client going, yeah. And I just let, like when they finished, they were in for a couple of hours, I just went home. I was like, I can't deal with this. So it was a horrible time. But it's one of those things where like you wouldn't, like you can't undo it. So you've just got to accept it. You've got to own it, learn from it, and give yourself like the feelings of, oh man, that was a dark time.
Yeah.
But out of it has blossomed like a lotus flower. This place.
And it's really impressive, and I hope that anybody listening that wants to start a podcast will think about using here, because it's the number one studio in Glasgow for that, because it's the highest end, all the gear, all the equipment.
I mean, we're not sitting, you know, there's loads of other studios, and a lot of them, we'll look at them, and we'll look at them with a critical eye. And you know, if you're a podcast tech nerd, as I know I am, I don't know whether you are.
Probably not. No, nowhere near as much, I don't think.
So I'm always looking at the podcast tech. Like I will pause videos filmed in studios, and I'm like analysing the fact there was a behind the scenes thing in Joe Rogan's studio.
Oh, was it?
Recently. It's like, wait, somebody's had the opportunity to go behind the scenes at Joe Rogan's studio, and they filmed it on, I don't know, like, what did they fucking film it on? It was jittering all over the place, and it's like, Jesus Christ.
Watch that after this.
But I was pausing it, you know what I mean? I'm pausing it and going,
because even
looking at the cameras, and because he's famous, his studio's famous for the mic, right? The Shure SM7B. So the mic, and then the other thing that folk might look at are his mic arms, which have evolved over the years. But you want to know what's Jamie working with.
Yep.
What's the lighting like?
I wonder if they must use an ATEM and stuff like that.
No.
Do they not?
No, it's a different setup. It's a totally different setup.
But they don't do it post, do they? He doesn't edit them in post, like, do they switch them?
I don't believe so. I honestly don't know how he does it. Because they've got 4 cameras, at least 4 cameras.
When Adam Curry went in, I remember him saying he was like, Jamie is like the ultimate professional. Like he was like genuinely
he's
really.
He's the G of podcast producers.
Really?
Like, he's got to be, mate. Because Joe's like Mr. Demanding, right? He's like that. Jamie, bring that up, and it's like, wait a wee minute, pal. I'm fucking live switching cameras here, and make sure the audio and everything's great. We're 3 hours in.
Aye.
And you want me to bring that up?
Yeah.
I don't know how he does it.
Honestly.
I don't know how he stays awake, and like, because they'll do like 3 a day or something like that. And how Jamie's got or maybe they have other techs now that come in, and
I doubt it.
You doubt it?
I honestly doubt it, because the room is small. His actual podcast, and it's surprisingly small. I remember thinking, because it's like the guy with the camera is kind of going round the compound, right? So it's obviously like a single level. Like you would imagine it's a sort of American strip mall type of property with his loads of rooms and everything. So he's going round all the different rooms, and the actual podcast room's down a kind of wee corridor, and it's into the right, and it's hard to scale it here, but I mean, if it's maybe the width here is like the length, and maybe at the edge of the table back down here, which for those that are watching and listening means nothing. Needless to say, my point is it's not particularly big, which I understand from the point of view of audio. You don't want a big massive cavernous room, as we discovered. But anyway, it's not the biggest room in the world. His green room bit's well cool though. He's got like a massive 70-inch TV with speakers and couches and chairs around it with folk. That's in another bit. So folk can obviously sit outside the room and watch and listen.
That's class.
But my point is, as a bit of a podcast nerd and snob, I'm always really interested in what other studios are doing. So like the mics that we bought in here, there's two different brands of mics. There's Electro Voice, which are the ones we're using. You're actually using my mic, which is my 50th birthday present to myself, but you're welcome, you can use it. And the other mics that we use in the other set are Rode Procasters. we went for dynamic mics rather than large diaphragm condenser mics because they're good at rejecting off-axis sound.
Yeah.
They're very good at rejecting the room. But there's other studios where we'll look at them and they'll describe themselves as having high-end gear, and you look at being snobs, I'm looking at the mics and going, that's not even close to high-end. And I'm learning I need to check that side of myself, right, and not be such a fucking dick. But to go back to the actual point, when you come in here, you don't need to worry about the tech.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about the cameras. It's the best gear that you can have in a space like this.
Yeah, and I've got one last question before we wrap up, because I haven't did it at the start. Like the last time I went and interviewed Ross, I was like, I've not asked any of my questions yet. But
Never even noticed.
do you have any pop culture interest? Because I never asked you this on our one.
No, that's true. You can go first, Cam.
I was talking to my girlfriend about this last night, and I don't have favourite films. I can't nail my favourite films down. I just have like a style that I like. A kind of Taxi Driver, Blade Runner 2049 kind of style, where it's that grittiness at night. A guy against the world.
Yeah.
It's just him and his. And I like that kind of stuff. But then I also really, really like, it's going to sound fucking ridiculous, like stuff like La La Land as well, and Les Miserables.
Yeah, well, I love La La Land actually. Like,
I like Layla. I can tolerate
It goes both ways. It goes both. I
I've
don't
never
know.
seen
I like.
La La Land.
No.
I'm judging it. I've never seen it.
It's a bit fucking. You know, if you explain it to someone, someone's going to go, "Do you, mate?"
I think it's a
Fucking-
fantastic movie.
It's really good.
I'm
Great
gonna
end.
watch it.
Great ending on it as well.
Oh, yeah.
But it's pop culture, and I just like loads of different stuff. I'm not really snobby with my tastes. I like watching shite films if they're shite because it's fun.
Yeah.
And with music and stuff like that, it sounds it's a very weak answer to say I'd listen to everything because it's a shite answer, but it's true. The only stuff I don't really listen to is like rap or Beyonce or something like that. I'm just not really.
We did talk about this.
Yeah, I really don't like. I think Beyonce's fucking pish, and I don't know why she's so famous.
It's that arse. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but I asked you what your favourite record was, and you mentioned that it was The Strokes.
Yes, it's the
So-
Strokes. Yeah, I love the Strokes. Love the Strokes. My Apple Wrapped or something. Well, basically, the Spotify Wrapped is where it shows all your favourite songs and stuff. It was like the first song, second song, third song, fifth song, fourth song, fifth, and it was all just from the Strokes' latest album. And I'd listened to like what must have been, I don't know, like 100, 250 hours of that album.
Wow.
And it was just that album.
Jesus.
Just because I had it on repeat all the time.
No, that's fair enough,
And it's
isn't
a
it?
fucking,
Yeah.
it's a fucking class
Have you
album.
got it in vinyl?
No, I don't.
For the past like 5 years or something like that, Spotify do that as well.
Yeah.
And I think I'd been in like the top 2% of Bruce Springsteen listeners.
Oh my
in the
God,
world.
mate.
Top
Fair enough.
2%. I'm going to see him in 2 weeks. Which
I
is
hate
Yeah.
Bruce
great.
Springsteen.
You hate Bruce
No, I'm
Springsteen?
only joking.
Yeah, I was getting ready to tend. I was tensing up there. No.
Don't you speak about the boss like that.
Mark, yourself.
My favourite pop culture or pop culture references.
What kind of pop culture interests you have?
So I mean, the biggest pop culture influence on me, without a doubt, is the film Back to the Future. Like genuinely, I know. And then there we go. That was a gift for you, I believe.
Yeah,
the Sports
we have,
Almanac,
yeah.
1956 to 2000.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean it's. I remember talking to my partner about this and saying to her about Back to the Future, and she's like, "I've never seen it," and I'm like, "Fucking what? You've never seen?"
Has she not?
She's never. I think she has, but it's not had any impact on her. But the impact, it had a massive impact on me. I remember before the film was even available in the UK, I'd got like the Panini sticker album. I'd got packs of stickers. I was 13, so I don't know whether that's too old to have been. But there was just something
No,
about.
not for stickers and stuff like
But
that.
there was just something about the whole culture of the film, what it represented from 1950s America. So the 1950s stuff was going through a pop culture resurgence in the mid 80s. Well, so you'd the adverts for Levi jeans with Marvin Gaye Heard It Through the Grapevine playing, which is another, like, it's massively imprinted on my mind, that ad. Buttonfly Levi 501 Stonewashed. and even the adverts with the guy getting into the bath, that was all 1950s stuff that had been resurrected in the 80s. And then, of course, you had this movie with Michael J. Fox, who was just the epitome of teen cool, even though he was in his 20s in the 80s. You had the 1950s thing, so you had the fashion, the music, and then you had like just the cool 80s stuff with the skateboards, right? So I had a paper round when I was 13,
right?
And after I seen Back to the Future, I don't know how I managed to get it, but I had one of the original kind of like small plastic skateboards that the kids were. Casey and Ice, that was pennyboard, right? I had one of them. I used to try and do my paper round on a pennyboard.
Like, total 13-year-old kind of like, I wish I was in America.
Like
the
everything.
Whereas the potholes around fucking suburban Glasgow, man, there's no chance.
Paper round probably took me 3 times as long to do, but I gave it a try. That year we went, the family holiday was somewhere in the south of France, and we went to like a big massive shopping mall in the south of France, and because I wanted to buy a Walkman, because obviously now I think it was a JVC one he had in the film, right? But for some reason it was like a Sony thing, and like they were way too expensive. I didn't have enough holiday money. But I remember going to Macro when we came back and buying a portable tape recorder, a tape player. So a generic Walkman, and buying the Back to the Future soundtrack on cassette at the same time, and just listening to that doing it on my paper round, thinking I was fucking Marty McFly.
And grabbing onto the back of cars when you're on your skateboard and stuff like
imagine
that.
that a pennyboard, man.
Fuck me, man.
Death.
Well, what I love about Back to the Future is like you've had that experience. The next generation's had that experience. The next generation, and the next. It was just going to keep going.
It's a massive, for me. It's just, as I said, it's a massive pop culture reference point, and it's also, you think you're 13, right? So that's a pretty, you're moving away from being just a wee kid playing with cars, and you're kind of a bit more aware of the world, and you're starting to wake up a wee bit to what life can be like. I don't know. It was just a massive
and you're
moment.
very impressionable as well. That age
Super,
too.
exactly. You've nailed it. You've nailed it. And it's funny, like I was thinking about songs that I would want played at my funeral, and there's only one song. We were talking about this morning. Only one song that I would have, like, and I would, like, my family can choose the rest. One song, it would be Huey Lewis and You's Power of Love.
Yep.
Because it's such a fucking brilliant song. Like, even when I listen to it now, it's just like you're right back, here's in the back of your neck as a kid, with that scene in Back to the Future where he's left the doc's workshop after all the clocks and everything. He's done the thing with the guitar, and he's singing on, he's kissed his girlfriend, she's fucked off, and he's skating home, or skateboarding home, holding on the back of the truck, and that dun 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 dun. Oh, fucking
cool,
hell, man.
Yeah, I even look back in time that they did, I think was maybe
that
part
was
2 or part...
No, it was the end of part 1.
Was it?
Where he wakes up. Oh, no, sorry. It's when the doc phones him and wakes him up to go to the Twin Pines Mall.
Right.
Or Lone Pines Mall, as it becomes after his wee adventure. That's playing in the background. That's playing on the radio.
I wasn't sure if it was like the second song on the second film, but Huey Lewis and the News are one of my favourite bands as well.
But bringing it more up to date, when it comes to music, for me it's Radiohead.
Right.
Like another... There's just an iconic period in my life, and there's no real reason for it being that, but it was around about 1998-ish. When did Paranoid Android come out? That was around about 97.
Aye, yeah.
And I remember being in my mate's car, the guy that actually helped us put all these panels up in here, because he owns a Spirit Level. Being in his car, and he had it on repeat on his CD player, just on repeat, that album. Another iconic Radiohead albums, In Rainbows, the one that they released for free.
It's the best one.
And that's my favourite album of all time, is that album.
Weird Fishes.
To it. Yeah. Weird Fishes is just unbelievable. Pop culture, Back to the Future, Radiohead. So you've got two kind of opposite ends of the sort of the feel good vibe. You get Back to the Future, it's just such a feel good movie with an amazing upbeat happy ending, and then you've got Radiohead, which
Dire Straits, man.
Yeah, it's such a introspective band. But it's like Desert Island, this type thing would probably be In Rainbows. Yeah, would be there.
Do you think it would be? Do you think it would be In Rainbows?
In Rainbows, I can't think of any other album that I know I could listen to over and over again and experience a different emotion with each song, like In Rainbows.
I'm I'm not even. I'll think about mine later. But
You're not allowed a mixtape. It has to be one album.
yeah, aye. Because I've been doing a playlist where I've been doing my musical journey. So from the song that was number 1 when I was born to the first couple of songs that I can remember to then
That's cool.
like songs that defined moments in my life, and then mixed in with my favourite songs. And it's growing. It's huge.
That's a good project.
Aye, I'm not finished it. It's been taking me ages.
Man, that's like one of those playlists that like you probably can't listen to all the time because there'll be certain tunes that come on and you'll be like,
Yeah.
There's a Glenn Campbell, believe it or not, Glenn Campbell of all people, but there's a what's that one? Something Heavy on My Mind, the Glenn Campbell song. But
I should know this.
I can't listen to it. I mean, but it's such an important song from my childhood because my mum and dad must have had a Glenn Campbell's Greatest Hits tape in the car.
Right,
Do you know what I mean? And it's just been one of those. They've just had it on, probably not even thought about it. But for me, I just loved it, and as a wee guy. But like, it always reminds me of my mum who passed away last year, and I can't even talk about that song.
Yeah.
But it's just you get. Like you're talking about these landmark songs, and you're right. There's probably, because the emotions songs evoke.
Yeah.
It's maybe like you could maybe listen to that playlist once and then be like, right.
Aye, I know.
That's took me in too much hits, that man.
That's true. It's true. Unless you block out all the bad memories and you just have the good memories only. But
only the good songs on as well.
You've got to have the bad memories, but man,
you've got to have its life in it. But where can, obviously I put all the socials on, but where can people find you online?
Just whatever you've said at the start, mate.
At Podcast Studio Glasgow.
Yep.
Everywhere. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Apart from Twitter, it's Podcast Glasgow on Twitter.
Right, okay.
But you won't see anything different on Twitter than you see anywhere else.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. This is the first time I've interviewed 2 people at the same time.
There you go, yeah.
And it's the first person I've had back, and it's your first time on a podcast in your own studio.
I know.
So it's a special episode. So thank you very much for coming on.
Appreciate it, man.
Great. Had great fun. I'll be doing this again in my own studio because I'm a fucking charlatan, apparently. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday.